Looks like I'm seeing a few people signing into Teams meeting. So Kate, I think we'll need to look like Josh Seeds signed into Teams meeting. Do you have time to shoot him a message?
Doing it right now.
Thank you. All right, so just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. So this is a public meeting. Keep your mics on mute. Just avoid background noise. And so we'll start with a roll call. I guess before that, I'll introduce myself. I'm Adam Coble. I'm the Forest Health and Monitoring Manager. Um, and so looks like Josh is here. We'll do a quick roll call, starting with Amanda Sullivan Astor. Is Amanda here? Brandon Persinger.
Present. Good morning.
Kevin Fenn. Kevin Fenn. Nope. All right. Josh Seeds.
I'm here.
Thanks, Josh. Rod Kramer.
Here. Good morning, everybody.
Seth Barnes. Seth Barnes. No.
Adam Seth is likely not to be here today.
Okay. Thanks, Megan. Kevin, I'm sorry, Ken Nygren. Ken Nygren. Stephen Fitzgerald.
I'm here.
Steve Vaught.
Good morning. I'm here.
Casey Kula.
Good morning. Casey Cool is here.
Francis Oyoung. Sorry if I mispronounced that.
You did great, Adam. I'm here. Nice to
Great.
see you all.
Thank you. Stephen Koski. Stephen Koski. I see him. I'll see if that. Stephen, you there?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just had taken another call.
Great. Thank you. And Megan Tuttle.
Good morning.
Great. So before we get started, I want to introduce some new monitoring staff that they're on the call today. Sarah Seethkin and Sam Schock. Sarah, would you like to take a minute and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey. Hi all. I'm Sarah Siefkin. I'm the new monitoring specialist here at ODF. Started working on Adam's team end January this year. Yeah, I moved to Salem from Southwest Utah. So I was working for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources as a biologist there, um, focusing mainly on native aquatic species and those habitats, so fish, amphibians, those guys. Yeah, and since I've been here on the compliance side of things, I've been working on that reforestation, free to grow study, and yeah, great to meet you all.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And Sam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, morning, everybody. My name is Sam Schock. I am also a monitoring specialist under Adam's team. I'm currently in a developmental role. So before this, I was working under Adam on the forest health side of things as a forest management technician. And I'm native to Oregon, grew up here, recently graduated from Oregon State with a degree in forestry. So yeah, that's what led me here. And thanks for having me. I appreciate the time. Nice to meet you this morning.
Great. Thanks, Sam and Sarah. Appreciate that. Okay, Kate, could you advance to the next slide, please? So just a quick update. And today, just to give you a heads up on where we're headed, you probably saw on the agenda, Mount Hood Environmental, it will be presenting today. So just an update before they get started, we have signed a work order with Mount Hood Environmental to develop pilot study for the long-term monitoring study. You should have received, those on the committee should have received a copy of the scope of work in your email. We also sent out the riparian rule selection document to Mount Hood Environmental for their review. And then we held a kickoff meeting with Mount Hood Environmental on March 29th. And so, we'd like to, we want to have Mount Hood Environmental come in and provide regular updates. Probably not every meeting, but on a regular occurrence. So you're hearing updates from them and the work that they're doing. And so up to this point, they've been really helpful and really helping us with the statistical aspect of the study. So Mark Rose from Mount Hood Environmental will be presenting today. And there will be time for questions after Mark is finished with his presentation. So I guess with that, I'll hand it over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it. Like Adam said, I'm Mark Rose. I'm a statistician with Mount Hood Environmental, which I'll refer to as MHE. And then on our team here, we also have Mark Tepley, who is a senior scientist and silvicultural expert on this project. So just to get started, we can advance the slide here, Kate. I'd like to provide some background before getting into the nuts and bolts of the riparian pilot study. So just some history and context. Back in 2021, Mount Hood Environmental conducted an independent statistical review of the previous compliance monitoring study, which was called the implementation study, and that ran from 2013 through 2017. And during that project, we developed a document that included a suite of recommendations for a future compliance monitoring effort, with the primary foci there being that there's a rigorous statistical design, as well as a program that would support ODF agency goals. More recently, we worked with ODF on developing the current reforestation study. First, we reviewed the reforestation pilot that occurred, and then we developed a study plan and field protocol for the reforestation study, which is currently ongoing. And then we'll be conducting the data analysis portion of that project this year. And so the upcoming pilot studies and the long-term compliance monitoring program will follow recommendations provided by MHE back in 2021, of course, adapted to the current FPA rules and within the context of the private forest accord. Next slide, please. Okay, so going into some of those recommendations we provided for any sort of compliance monitoring going forward, we had several general recommendations that include one, looking at rule level compliance rather than harvest unit level compliance, and in the same line, narrowing the research questions of the study. So in general, looking at a small set of rules and having a high amount of confidence that any estimates of compliance are reliable and accurate, to utilize study design methods such as stratification or clustering when appropriate, either across Oregon by harvest units or within harvest units. And the intent there is to increase the efficiency of any compliance monitoring while maintaining that statistical rigor and reliability. And then calculating sample size based on the desired certainty in results. So, bigger sample, more certainty, also more effort required. There are a couple of recommendations that I also want to mention that are no longer necessarily applicable. One is mitigating for significant effects of non-response and access permission. So previously, there was pretty high non-response rates for the private non-industrial landowners, and we recommended accounting for that with statistical methods and other study design methods, but we don't consider that to be a significant issue going forward. It may occur, but as the exception rather than the rule. Additionally, estimating the population size should no longer be required because, looks like we got Seth Barnes here. Welcome, Seth.
Thanks.
So we won't have to estimate that population size anymore because there should be notifications of completion that are posted in Ferns. So we should know how many harvests occurred. Next slide, please. Okay, so some purpose and some scope for the riparian pilot study. First, setting this up, this is the first of 3 pilot studies. So we have the riparian pilot study, which we're talking about today. Then we'll have a roads pilot study and a steep slopes pilot study. And the intent of all of these is to support the long-term compliance monitoring program. So starting it off on the right foot, as it were, dealing with any potential, issues or things that need to be figured out prior to starting the actual monitoring study proper. So what's within this riparian pilot study? One is defining the list of FPA rules for water protection that we want to monitor. Also testing and evaluating field methodologies with the intent there that we can optimize those. And then similarly optimizing the sample size and the field protocols being used. And then identifying any unforeseen challenges and solutions, going through this entire process, developing the study, drawing the samples, going out in the field, testing all these methods and figuring out what works best, what's the most efficient, and what's going to give us the desired certainty and statistical rigor that we're looking for reporting and inferring compliance across Oregon. Some additional considerations here is that we want to build both the pilot and the long-term study such that they are adaptable to ongoing development of the FPA due to the private forest accord, particularly relating to the ongoing spatial data modeling and process for things like stream typing, as well as the new Ferns processes that is currently on the uptake. Next slide, please. So that's what was in the scope. What's outside the scope? Well, first here, we're not looking to report compliance during the pilot study. Instead, the focus of the pilot study is more on the methods and what works. Similarly, we're not looking to look at unit level compliance. Instead, we're looking at a narrow set of water protection rules so we can have really high confidence in what we're looking at. Next, we won't be looking at prescriptions that include plans for alternate practice because we are simply sticking to the rules that we can most readily measure and that are also applicable across many harvest units. We will not be evaluating desired future conditions or effectiveness of the FPA rules. Instead, we'll be focused on compliance, non-compliance, and how to best get there. Next slide. So the role of MHE during this riparian pilot study effort is to develop the study design and the field protocol will be providing recommendations for the FPA rules and components thereof that are evaluated, the process for drawing samples as well as sample sizes, the overall study design, so things like when to apply stratification or clustering when it's appropriate, the field protocols, as well as the types of data that are collected. And during this entire process, just like we're checking in with you here today, the plan is to correspond with the ODF compliance monitoring team to ensure that all the recommendations we're providing are feasible, as well as align with the priorities of the compliance monitoring program, the committee here, as well as ODF's agency goals. Next slide. Okay, so now to look at some of those candidate rules. We reviewed that list of candidate rules from the rule selection process your group went through a few weeks ago. And today we're only looking at those rules that were considered of interest to look at during the pilot. So those other groups of rules, either the rules that were decided not to be included or the rules that could be included at a later date past the pilot study are not being included in this current effort. However, we are, of course, considering those rules that were thought of as interesting and important, but maybe not today, as possible to include down the line. So keeping that in the back of our minds, of course. So based on those candidate rules, all those ones that got the thumbs up, they fell into three primary categories. So one is the stream buffers, which is, of course, measurable in the field. Then we have the small landowner options, which is also field observation based. And then finally, we have some administrative related rules, which generally could be collected in the office on a desktop review. Next slide. So just like you all did, we went through that list of rules with our own set of criteria. Some of these criteria are very similar to the ones you used, such as compliance being directly measurable, that it's reasonably efficient to collect that data. You know, you don't have to take hundreds and hundreds of measurements, that the compliance or non-compliance or measurements thereof are resistant to seasonal or pre and post-harvest conditions, because we're looking to get a snapshot here. We don't want to have to continually visit these sites. The idea is you send out surveyors, they conduct the survey, get a snapshot of the conditions at the harvest unit post-harvest, and from there are able to collect that compliance information. Next, that the necessary classification data, such as stream typing, is available from ferns or other sources prior to the site visit. So something like, hey, this harvest unit has some type F streams. We expect that there will be rule applications of type F streams there, not going in entirely blind and just searching for things. And that multiple site visits wouldn't be required for these rules. And finally, that the rules that are looked at are widely applicable to a substantial number of harvest units. So we don't want to be looking at rules that are applied very infrequently. Rather pick, those low-hanging fruit that are most likely to have a large impact or influence or wide inference on, the conditions of harvests in Oregon. Next slide, please. So after evaluating those rules in those categories based on the previous criteria that I outlined, looking at that stream buffer category, most of the candidate rules met the criteria. but it's important to note that we won't be looking to evaluate components that are dependent on seasonal conditions or pre-harvest conditions, of course, because we're not looking to have site visits pre and post. It's just one set of site visits after harvest. So our conclusion there with the stream buffer category is that it's a primary focus for this study. Similar to that, the small landowner options, candidate rules in that category generally met the criteria. However, it's important to note that the number of harvest units that will apply that small forest landowner minimum option is currently unknown. We can definitely take a guess based on Fern's notifications how many small forest landowners there are, but we don't know how many will select that minimum option. So we won't specifically know the size of that portion of the population until after those harvest notification completions are notifications of completion are available. So our conclusion there is it's also a primary focus for the study. Go on ahead. Next slide. Thank you. So looking at the administrative rules, those are generally very easy to collect. You know, if you can collect it in the office, it's not a whole lot of effort compared to going out in the field. However, they're frequently not measurable rules. So, you know, think of a stream buffer. That's pretty clear cut on, hey, you need this many feet of stream buffer from the active channel. These administrative ones are generally more informational rather than directly resulting in compliance or non-compliance. However, we think they could be very useful for information and educational purposes, which, you know, align with ODF's agency goals. So learning about things like the uptake of the new reporting requirements, potentially being used to lead education on how to use the new reporting, as well as examining concordance of Fern's data and on the ground observations, and then identifying potentially common issues that could be occurring and informing ODF how to account for or mitigate that in the future. So our conclusion with the administrative rules is that they're not necessarily a primary focus, but you may as well collect them opportunistically because it could certainly be helpful. Next slide. Okay, so to provide a couple examples of those candidate rules, just diving in a little bit, but not too deep here. For the stream buffers, I listed some FPA rules below that apply for standard practices for a few stream types and vegetation retention. So considerations, if you wanted to go through and look at the actual text of the FPA, our considerations there after looking at that is that we should look at the active channel because, you know, it's the active channel, it's pretty clear cut and what is the active channel and what is not. However, there's other language in some of these rules that relate to the channel migration zone, roads and yarding corridors, and future conditions that we are most likely not going to have on the table here. For channel migration zones, that could relate to definitions that are considered guidance rather than directly in the FPA. For roads and yarding corridors, you might need to have a little bit of information on pre-harvest conditions or other information. And then, of course, future conditions is not something that we're looking at within the purview of this. And then similarly, for the small forest landowner minimum option, we have that riparian vegetation option. And I just want to note here that if we want to include small forest landowners in the study as part of the population, and we want to look at vegetation retention, well, then we need to include the minimum option because some of them may have selected to use the minimum option. Next slide, please. All right, so just a list of some potential approaches, things we're considering right now. One is, of course, stratifying harvest units by the East and West Oregon regions, both because of differences in the landscape as well as differences in the FPA rules that apply to them in regard to stream buffers. Another is to evaluate the harvest unit coverage that is necessary for reliable results. So when we're thinking about stream buffers, that generally relates to average buffer width, right? You couldn't just go out there and take a single measurement and know if the unit is in compliance or not in compliance. So the question is, how much coverage do you need to get in a reliable estimate of the average buffer width? That's something we are considering testing through the pilot study so that we can optimize that amount of coverage that's necessary. Like, how many stream segments do you need to survey? How spread out are they? Questions like that. We can also examine concordance of that FERNS data with on-the-ground observations to see how well things are lining up as we go. And then another potential approach is we can consider adapting components of Washington DNR's protocols. There's a lot of similarities between the rules that are evaluated in Washington and the riparian roads and steep slopes rules we will be looking at here in Oregon. So we can certainly consider borrowing from them. However, there are several key differences to be aware of. One major one is the surveyor team requirements in Washington. So there's a pretty high bar for the surveyor team in Washington, and it often includes members from like multiple agencies or groups have to be present. And downstream from that is that compliance or non-compliance is directly determined in the field in Washington, as well as if you're somewhere in the middle, it's called deviation. So deviation from compliance, and then that's also the degree of deviation is also being evaluated in the field. So that's something to be aware of and not necessarily within the purview of the riparian pilot or long-term compliance study. Next slide, please. Okay, so some anticipated outcomes from the project here, the riparian pilot. Of course, developing that study design and protocol document for the pilot study that covers the selection of water protection FBA rules with the intent to collect a set of data that can comprehensively inform the structure of the long-term CMP. So like I said earlier, starting it off on the right foot. And below are just some example questions that we could look at answering with the pilot to give you an idea of, what's the purpose and putting that in context. So questions like which rules should be included or excluded from a long-term compliance monitoring program, how much effort or coverage is required within each harvest unit for reliable compliance determination. So, if you need a lot of effort in every harvest unit, that's going to result in a lower sample size of harvest units. But if you can get away with less effort and still have reliable results, hey, maybe you can start including more harvest units every year. And then finally, were there inconsistencies between notifications, the data that's available prior to visiting these harvest units, and then on the ground observations, and asking questions as well. If that occurred, then why did that occur? Is there something common between all of these that we should look at mitigating in the future, potentially, outside of the scope of compliance monitoring? Next slide, please. Okay, so just a few next steps that we're looking at here in the next month or so. One is to define the study population. So you might remember that from very beginning of the presentation when I was talking about those recommendations. We need to define who's in and who's out. And then whatever group is in is the group that you can make inference for. And then generating a finalized FPA rule list. So all the rules that will be included, developing those draft field protocols, and then defining categories for opportunistic data collection. So that informational stuff, like the desktop pieces. Next slide, please. So I'll hop into the study population question because I think that's the next one for us to tackle. And it's also kind of a big question in some ways. When thinking about what is the study population, I broke it into two pieces here. So it's what stream types do we want to include, and what harvest activity types do we want to include. So for the stream type question, primarily based on our review of that rule selection, there appeared to be, some concerns about including type N streams, particularly small type N streams, within the pilot for several reasons. One is that, the classification of those type N streams is ongoing, which was motivated by that private forest accord. So there's currently work being done to classify and map all the streams, particularly type N streams in Oregon. And additionally, there are rule complexities that relate to that through the revised FPA rules, things like what types of streams does your type N flow into? Is it a terminal or lateral type N stream? And then the rules are applied differently between those. So we are certainly on the fence whether that one should be included, considering I think we're in a bit of an uptake period on that set of rules or for that stream type. And then the other question is, do we want to include type D streams? So that's domestic water use streams. Clearly they're, very important for public health, but the frequency of them is pretty low. So if we pick a random sample of harvest units, it's unlikely that we'll pick up very many type D streams. So if there's very few type D streams in a sample, in the sample of harvest units, well, if you have one type D stream or two type D streams you looked at for an entire year, is that a fair sample size to infer compliance for all type D streams across the state? Probably not. So that's another one that's currently up in the air. And then finally, the harvest activity types that should be included. Do we want to include all harvests that occur and have water protection rule applications, or do we want to say not include fins or something like that? That's another question we have there. So that's what I have today. You can go to the next slide if you want, if everybody would prefer to look at a picture instead of lines and lines of text. You can look at my only picture I put into this presentation. But I think we'll pause here for some questions if folks have them. Yeah, feel free to pipe up and ask some questions, or mill it over, and contact the ODF folks when you're able to formulate, something well thought out. Because I threw a bunch of info at you today, and if you come up with questions down the road, I'm sure we can get those handled. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Mark, for presenting. Appreciate that. So really the rest of our time today is going to be open for discussion, questions for Mark. And so we'll open it up there if there's any questions that the committee has for Mount Hood Environmental. Yeah, Francis?
Hi, I'm still catching up, but Mark, can you tell me where geographically are you going to be going? And maybe that's already been defined or talked about at other meetings, but I'm in Southwest Oregon in the Rogue Basin. So just wondered where geographically you're going to be doing this work. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Francis. This should occur across all of Oregon. The intent here, we're not looking to report compliance during the pilot study, but keeping in mind for long-term monitoring, we want any inferences that we have for compliance to be as widely applicable as possible. So what is the compliance for type F streams on the west side or on the east side, and then summarizing that across groups to say what's the average across the whole state. So always keeping in mind that we want this to be as widely applicable as possible.
Any other questions for Mark?
Yeah, I just want to jump in.
Hey, Mark, this is Josh. Oh, go ahead, Casey.
No, go for it, Josh.
Okay. This is Josh Seeds from Oregon DEQ. I have a question on inclusion of type N or type D streams because those are important both for their own purposes and then, for downstream fish waters and for downstream drinking water intakes. Um, So some of the classifications are still being developed. What's the feasibility of including those stream types in later iterations of compliance monitoring once classification has had time to be implemented more fully and has sort of stabilized as operations have gone on and stream survey and classification activities have matured?
Well, thanks, Josh. I really appreciate the question because this is kind of where I was hoping the discussion would go. Um, yeah, so the intent here would be, I think we have a couple paths we could go down. One would be to look at the type N streams, type D streams right now during the pilot study, just include them with the understanding that some of this stuff might be wrong, as in the accuracy of the typing might be, inconsistent, or the other path, of course, is to not include them during the pilot study with the intent of including them down the line as that classification process, reaches, I don't know if you want to call it maturity or phase two, as it's called in the PFA or what have you. But I think that's important to keep in mind, particularly for, we have a lot of interests here, including the PFA and the HCP and other things going on to be aware of. And Mark Tuckley, feel free to hop in at any point if you have any suggestions or
Sure.
thoughts.
So I've been wrapping my head around this one, but a thought is that since many of the general aspects of the rules are the same on FNNs, i.e., with the stream buffers, we may learn quite a bit in doing the F streams that could be scaled up to N's once they are known. But I'm hesitant in saying that as a recommendation before thinking through the differences in the topographies of F streams versus N streams, if there might be any differences we need to account for there. But that's something we need to think about.
So I think Casey, you had a question.
Oh yeah, no, mine was the starting point was I appreciate your presentation, even if there weren't pretty pictures. So it's helpful to see both your proposed plan for the pilot studies, and also it's been good to see the compliance team's willingness to go to you for the information. So thank you for that. I also appreciate Josh's question about type N and type D streams. It's a big part of the landscape, and though it's changing, it's going to be in the long term important to be checking for compliance.
Thanks, Casey. Appreciate it.
Any other questions for Mark? All right. Well, yeah, appreciate the comment there, question, Josh, and that's something we'll be talking more internally and looking at options, and we'll be taking a close look at that and talking with MHE more about that. So, if you have any additional thoughts, comments on that, please feel free to reach out to myself. And I guess I've got just a few other updates before we wrap up. So sort of more of a next steps. Kate, I think there was a slide. Perfect. Thank you. So as Mark presented on the riparian rural pilot study and development, and so they'll be continuing to work on that. ODF is currently working on road rules selection. So that is being reviewed by ODF subject matter experts, field coordinators, and stewardship foresters. The steep slope rules are in review in the monitoring unit right now. And then that will go through the same internal review process as the road rules. We plan on sending the road rules selection document out by the end of this month, and plan to have the steep slopes rule selection document to you in May. So those are the main updates that I wanted to provide, and just a reminder that Rebecca McCown had sent out let's see, this was April 1st, the Mount Hood Environmental Statistician Work Order that does include a pretty detailed timeline in terms of the deliverables and work with Mount Hood Environmental, and then the latest version of the charter as well. And we did, after receiving feedback from the committee, we finalized that charter for 2024, but we will revisit annually, beginning in late fall, or I guess winter. So those are the main updates that I had, or next steps. Any questions on that before we wrap up today?
Hey, Adam, real quick, do you want to let them know about our upcoming visit to Washington?
Thank you. Yeah. So Kate and I are going on a diplomatic mission to Olympia, Washington, DNR, to meet with their compliance monitoring group. And, a way to learn more about their program, some of the history there, and what's sort of next steps for them, and compare notes, and we'll be presenting and updates, and so looking forward to that visit and meeting with Washington DNR. So. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining today, and I think we'll end there. Appreciate everyone's time, and we'll see you at the next meeting in July.
Cool. Thanks for your work so far.
Thanks, Casey.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.